Hi there. This session's about posting bills in Zoho Books. We're going to go into the document section as well and how it can be used with Zoho Autoscan. Whether or not you're a Spondu client or just doing this yourself, I'm hoping this will be reasonably useful. To start off, obviously you need to have a Zoho Books account. Um, we've already got one up, set up. This is a trial account, but it has all the functionality that we need. Um, I think so. So bills start off in the purchases section. So the purchases section of Zoho Books can be found from the main dashboard. So we've got purchases. We've already done a video on vendors, so I suggest maybe watching that if you want to add vendors. However, you actually don't need to add a vendor before you actually post a bill. You can create the vendor as you're posting the bill, and we'll try and go through all of that as we start now. Okay, now we're going to go for the bill section. The bill section, we as an accounting practice tend to use the bill section via Zoho Autoscan heavily. So what I'm about to show you, we tend to not even use this function that much. But I'm going to show you, for the purposes of understanding it, how to actually add a bill manually. So this won't always happen, but just to make this easier, I'm going to say we paid a chap called Smith an electronics purchase, and I'm going to post a bill. So let's say we paid that bill from our bank statement on the 6th of February 2019. And let's say I don't know, we received the invoice for that on the 31st of January. So here we go into the purchases section, then we're going to go bills. You may, if you've already got a supplier set up for this or a vendor, you may go into vendors and add the bill from that vendor. But for the purposes of this, let's assume this vendor doesn't exist. So he's not Smith is not on this list of vendors we've already set up here. So here we're going to go Smith Electronics. Obviously, we'd have a primary contact and etc. etc. But we can go through all of that and we explain all of that in our vendors video. And you probably want to add more details associated to the vendor. But in particular, one thing we're quite strict on when we do bookkeeping is adding things like VAT number, etc. for the vendor. So at this point, let's say I've got the document and it's invoice number one from that particular vendor. I may have a purchase order, and there's a whole purchase order section of Zoho Books that we will go through one day. And at this point, there is a process of us actually matching this bill against the purchase order, and we can explain that in more detail. As I said before, I think the bill date is going to be 1st of January 2019, I think. And the bill we've received is a payment term for 30 days. So this is computer equipment. Furniture and equipment. Obviously, you guys may have a proper accounting code for that. And let's say it's £1,200. No, £12,000. Let's leave it as that. £12,000, and there was no VAT on it for some reason. I might have bought it from overseas. At this point, I've now posted the bill. You'll see this bill sitting there in accounts payable. So just to reiterate, this is now accounts payable. Okay, so how do we pay off this invoice? There's a number of ways. You can record a payment against it, and a lot of non-accountants, particularly our clients and things like that, tend to jump into these functions and start using them, and sometimes it can cause problems. What you'll see is on the bill, I've just clicked add manual payment. Now, you can totally do this, but you need to understand what you're doing at this point. Is you're creating a banking transaction on the bank account. And bear in mind, you have the banking module to be reconciling the bank account anyway. So, particularly if you're not that used to accounting, I would probably suggest ensuring that you use this. You probably don't use this function too much, and maybe rely on the banking module a lot more, unless you're understanding exactly what it is. So here, for example, let's say I paid this money via bank transfer, and I paid it on the 6th of February 2019. Okay, so mode of transfer is bank transfer, um, and then I've put it against our test bank account that we're using. Um, I'm going to post this incorrectly because you're going to see what happens when you kind of do this. And I put £12,000. It defaults to the full invoice value, but I could put something different there. I'm going to go back and change that in a minute. So that's there. Now, what have I done here? You'll see that this bank account is now out by quite a lot. Previously, we posted an expense transaction of 4,000, but we've just done 12,000 here. This supplier that we're meant to be paying is Smith Electronics. We've only actually paid them out the real bank statement, 7,500. Yet, because I've added a payment manually in the bank account via the invoice, you'll see we've got a manually added transaction here of £12,000. So the invoice is fully paid off, but it doesn't actually match what we've got on the actual bank statement. So the date's correct, etc., but it's not correct. So if I go find a match, we're not going to be able to match this transaction against that payment. So I've got two options. I could go and change the amount of this transaction to match the 7,500, or I could do what most people do, and this is what I'd probably suggest doing if you're not used to using this. So I've deleted that transaction. That means the invoice is now sitting there as unpaid. So instead of this time round of going, so I've got an invoice of £12,000. Instead of this time round of going record payment, I'm going to go back into the banking module, and I'm going to start reconciling this payment against the actual bank statement itself. I'm going to find a match, then I'm going to start searching for this transaction. Smith Electronics. Increase this to 12,000 because obviously the invoice is 12,000. So it's 120,000, but it doesn't matter because it'll come up anyway. I need to change the date range. This invoice was on the 31st of 31st of February. No, January. I've searched for the invoice and found the invoice. I can now select this invoice and go and try and pay it off. Now, this is why if you're not used to using accounting systems in general, it's not just Zoho, which is like this, is you've obviously found the invoice, it's not matching the bank statement line. If it was matching the bank statement line, at this point, I could just press match. But you'll see down here, it's sitting there as pending. So I'm unable to match that. Because it's a partially paid invoice, technically what I tend to do is I actually start to use the categorize manually function. Now, be careful not to create an expense transaction here, because what we want to do, we've got a bill. So we want to pay it off via accounts payable. So we're going to go down to a vendor payment transaction. Then we're going to search for the vendor, so Smith Electronics. And then you'll see down here it finds the invoice. I can press pay in full, but it's not going to let me reconcile that. Well, it will actually let me reconcile that, but it will be recording a payment in excess on the bank account. Um, so that's not what we want to do because it will screw up our bank reconciliation. Um, so what we want to do is partially pay this invoice. So this invoice of £12,000, we're going to partially pay it against the 7,500. At this point, I then press save, and then you'll see it disappears from our bank reconciliation screen. It moves into the all transaction section, which for accountants, this is essentially is now on the nominal ledger within the banking, so it's now there. And again, you'll notice the status is categorized as opposed to manually added. Um, if the invoice matched exactly, the status would be matched instead of categorized. But fundamentally, to us, it means the same thing. It means that it's been matched against a bank statement line, so it's kind of like a real banking transaction as opposed to, I don't know, a fake one or one which hasn't been reconciled.